Well, first of all, tell us who you are, introduce us, say your name, and just kind of say who you work with right now.
My name is Drew Remke, and really? Okay. And I am the Vice President of Engagement for Pioneers. So Pioneers is a global church planting organization, mission organization. We have people in about 100 countries around the world trying to plant churches among people that lack gospel access.
Awesome. Okay. And so just if you would give us a little bit about your background that sort of got you into that position.
Yeah, I've always been engaged with church planting my whole life, and then Jordan and I together, we've been a part of various church plants here in Texas, and always had a deep love for the nations. And there was a point when we had an opportunity to join a friend in the Middle East and go for 2 years and study Arabic and kind of just travel around and kind of just ask that question. I'm saying, man, what's happening over here? What's the Lord doing? Like, what are the needs? What are the opportunities? And really in that time, I felt like the Lord just really stirred me and Jordan's heart for the country of Oman. And in that process, we were also asking people about the organizations they're serving with and what they liked and didn't like. And then, we found that most people said that it was just an organization, it's fine. But the people we met that worked with Pioneers talked really highly of their org, and that kind of stood out to us. And so we came back to the States and did some, more further research and decided to join Pioneers. So we joined Pioneers back in 2011 and ended up spending 12 years church planting in the Middle East.
Awesome. So I'm going to back us up a little for that. We're going to come back to that in just a minute.
Sure.
But so I want to even go back further with you personally. Of course, you and Jordan have been in the ministry since 2011 overseas. Is that right?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And so I want to hear a bit more about just your salvation story, just going back, your testimony, I always feel like it's important for people to hear, to connect the dots and kind of see what was that like?
Yeah, for sure. So I, was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, and my family moved to the Dallas area when I was 3 years old. And I grew up in a very traditionally Midwest Catholic household. Okay. And it was really later in high school when I was going through confirmation class and I was really kind of struggling with the answers. I started asking a lot of questions, like they wanted questions, but then also didn't want questions at the same time.
Yeah.
And it kind of sent me on a journey of discovering the Lord just really kind of used that to draw me to himself. And so it was really in that time that I started attending church with some friends, went to a couple of conferences, and really the Lord just kind of opened my eyes to understand the gospel and to see him really for the first time. It was probably between my sophomore and junior year of high school when that happened. And so it, was pretty drastic and stark contrast to my life as far as what I was chasing after before to kind of the direction that I shifted towards, and just got really involved with, within ministry. And probably a year after I came to faith, said, hey, I'm going to start a small group with guys that I played high school football with. And I remember going to my youth pastor and saying, hey, I'm starting this Bible study. Do you have any resources that you recommend? And he's like, well, how many people are coming? And I was like, I think I have 20 signed up. And he was like, what's going on? And so I think the Lord just kind of always gifted me and be able to draw people together. And so I think that was just early on seeing that like the Lord was drawing me into kind of this entrepreneurial, starting new things and serving him that way.
Yeah, very cool. And so I guess that kind of goes hand in hand, but talk to me a little bit about how you and Jordan then got the interest. I know you spoke about it a little bit, but if you can let us in a little bit on the conversations that you had to said, hey, we're interested in, God feels like he's pulling me in this direction. And what, as far as going into missions and going to the Middle East, and can you talk us through, sort of let us be a fly on the wall in some of those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I would first say that I was well discipled in high school and into college. And I had people that really invested in my life that had a love for the nations. And so that's kind of really where things really kind of began. And I would meet with people, and we'd gather, when I was at university, and once a week, and we would just pray. We'd pray for the ends of the earth, and I got involved with international students, and Bible study with all Japanese students, and a bunch of things like that we just kind of became a natural part of life, that it didn't feel weird to me. It just felt like that's how we live out this Christian life. Like, we have good news to share, And when we got introduced, Jordan and I, she is, somebody who grew up living in a lot of different places. She lived in Argentina for a while, and I had just spent the summer in Spain, and so there was like kind of just this natural, like, kind of global vision, global for, kind of love for saying, hey, what else is out there that weren't in ways that we might serve. I think God had kind of just formed us from a young age as that's the kind of people that we were. Okay. And we weren't really sure what that was going to look like. And I remember we went and visited this team that was serving in Northwest Spain. And then, without a better way to say it, the Lord was just like, didn't feel like that was the right place for us to go. And the two of us were in this conversation about, like, so now what? Where do we go? What do we do? Yeah. And I had just organized this conference in Lubbock, Texas at the time, and we're having dinner with the main speaker. And so he's kind of just asking us questions in life and those kinds of things. And we're just kind of laying out this, we thought Spain, but now we're not really sure. And then he just said, man, I know this is kind of weird, but my wife and I are moving to the Middle East in August. Why don't you guys come with us? Wow. And so it was a little sudden, it was like 6 months from now. What if we just picked up and left the country? And we took a little bit of time to pray about it. And sure enough, 6 months later, we were living in the Middle East.
Wow. Yeah. That's really, really awesome. Okay. So, then tell us, so let's just keep going a little bit there. You obviously you had to learn the language when you got to that particular part of the road, right? Mm-hmm. Tell us about that journey, and how what did that look like as an English speaker in an Arabic, mostly Arabic speaking place, and mm-hmm. What does that part of the journey of being a missionary sort of feel like and look like?
Sure. Yeah, there's really kind of two major kind of segments of our life in the Middle East. So the first 7 years, we were in the country of Oman, and we spent 2 years actually enrolled as students in a Arabic language program. Okay. So we would do, full day of language classes, and we hang out with our local friends at night, and we do what we can to share truth and gospel with them. Mm-hmm. And so then after the first 2 years of Arabic, then we kind of pursued opening a number of different small businesses. And so I partnered with a Brazilian guy, and we opened a Brazilian soccer academy. I had an American friend, and we had like a water technology that we were, doing representing for, and that kind of allowed us to be there because it was called a closed country, and so we couldn't just get a religious visa to be there. And yeah, that's what we did for the first 7 years, and it was, it was complicated, it was tough, learned a ton, but we, eventually we're in a place where we had, we moved to a city that about 500,000 people in the area, and there was no known believers among them. And then about 4 people came to faith. And so then we got together with another American family and this Brazilian family and these 4 believers. And we would just try to meet to see the seeds of a church be started there in that place.
Wow. And so that was segment 1. Is that right?
Yeah, that was segment 1. And
so I'll just ask because maybe other people will be curious. So what has come of that particular, of that church or that seed that you're talking about?
Yeah, so unfortunately what happened with that was the government pressure was really strong. Yeah. They arrested everybody. They interrogated everybody. The Brazilian, partner of mine ended up spending time in prison. The local folks that we're friends with, I think the pressure became a little too much. There was a single lady who eventually fled the country and, lives in Australia now. And then there's a family and a single guy, and they kind of pop in and out. It's probably the best way to say it. Praise the Lord, some other folks have come to faith, but with that initial group, I feel like it was largely, the flame was largely put out by police pressure that was placed on them.
Yeah. And how, I mean, I know it's obvious, but can you talk a little bit about, like, I'm sure that took some time to sort of like recover from.
Yeah, it did. We actually, things were kind of intense, and the other American family, they had their visa revoked, in the same time, and so they had to leave. For us, with the businesses that I created, like we stopped getting approvals, and so we had to sign off these businesses that I set up to other people, so that my name wasn't affiliated with them anymore, so they could keep going in progress. And so it was really in that time when, our local friends and believing local friends that, hey, you have to get out of the country. And so we actually left, and that's part of the second phase of our story, before our Brazilian friend ended up in jail and before we were formally blacklisted from the country. Yeah. So, but it was tough. It was sad. It was been involved in a good number of church plants, and that was definitely the hardest. Yeah. And probably the one that afterwards you always kind of question, like, could we have done it this way or that way? And it's hard to know. It's hard to know.
For sure. And so, as far as a family timeline, I know at some point you had kids in there, and can you just sort of walk us through how that? I mean, just sort of or help us with the timeline.
Yeah. So in 2011, when we were heading back, our kids were 4, 2, and a newborn. Wow. So they spent those 10 years, that 10-year stretch, there in the Middle East, and so it's funny because we didn't. In a lot of ways, we kind of shielded our kids from a lot of the things that were happening, within the country, and they kind of like learned as to, oh, that's why we moved. Oh, that's why this happened, as essentially adults, or older teens. So we ended up leaving Oman when our kids were, they were 12, 10, and 8, or 11, 9, and 7, I think around that time. And so that was kind of when the transition happened for us.
Okay. Well, and then go ahead and go on into your sort of second phase over there.
Yeah, so the second phase is when we clearly couldn't be there any longer. We were asking this question, like, all right, Lord, what do we do? Where do we go from here? And then we had dinner with some friends of ours in Dubai, and they said, hey, we have a church planting resident who's here now. He's new to the region. He's an American guy. He's in the process of getting married this summer, and he wants to plant a church. He's like, you have a history of planting churches, and you've been around the region for a long time. Like, would you consider pairing up with this guy to plant together? And so this friend from Redeemer Dubai, kind of made the introduction. And so I met this gentleman, Blaine, and we sat and had some conversations and see if we had some good alignment and kind of our hopes and dreams and visions, for that. And so back in 2016, we launched Redeemer Church of Al Ain, which was, was a very different feel to the Arab house church that we had been working with. This was a international church, so that the city was 70% foreign nationals, and so within a couple of years, we had a few hundred people that'd be there in our weekend services from 30 or 40 different countries. There was usually a third African, a third Asian, a third Western, and so we kind of pursued that and saw an amazing amount of fruit. Not necessarily with local Arabs, but like the next ring of countries around there. So like we got to baptize Sudanese and Egyptian and Jordanian and Pakistani and a guy from Afghanistan, and so it was a really fun kind of global outward church expression, in an international city, and that was not the ministry that I expected us to pursue, but it was really, really life-giving.
And where was this?
So this was in the United Arab Emirates.
Okay, because I think you said the name of the church was
Al Ain, Redeemer Al Ain.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's about an hour and a half from Dubai or Abu Dhabi. So,
Okay, very cool. And so, how long were you there then?
so we spent 5 years there, and we actually, after like 3 years, we sent out Blaine, the guy that I had partnered with, to plant Redeemer Kuwait, and so we sent him out to plant another church in Kuwait, and yeah, it was in a good spot. You know, we were really happy, but COVID really threw things upside down for us.
Right.
We actually couldn't meet legally for like 9 months, and we just did everything online. Even when we could meet, you're like 2 meters apart, like in a little like looked like we were setting up a chessboard for a church service, and it was crazy. I mean, it was really intense. If I left the city, you'd have to wear a tracker bracelet and stay in your home for 2 weeks, at any time. So, but anyways, at the end of that time, it kind of felt like a fresh start. Yeah. And it was kind of a question of like, what do we do here? And so there was a couple of things that after 5 years, we said, all right, we brought in some new staff, and our kids were going into high school, and my mother-in-law, was diagnosed with dementia, and there was a number of things, that just kind of felt like this seemed like a time for a season stateside.
Sure.
And so in 2021, we decided to, instead of, the church paying for my kids' school fees, we hired a Nigerian staff member and an Egyptian staff member to replace me.
Okay.
And that allowed us to transition back, and the church to be in a really healthy spot, and us to kind of just serve our kids with this, season of life that they're in family. Yeah.
For sure. And so now, if you can, I'm going to go back to Pioneers, which obviously all this activity you've been doing has been involved with Pioneers, and sort of like that's the agency through which you're sort of doing these ministries, right? So tell us a little bit about just Pioneers, its history, and you've already spoken to some of the things that were attractive to you about that group. So if you can, give us some history about Pioneers.
Yeah, so Pioneers was founded in 1979, and largely they say we want to see churches planted in places where there's not churches. Is probably the simplest way to say that. About 40% of the world we consider to be unreached. Where they not only don't have churches, but maybe they don't have access. Maybe there's not churches in their language or in their region or whatnot. And so we're doing our best to, see churches started among what we call the 7,000 non-reached people groups, around the world. And it's a large organization, about 3,000 global members, serving in over 100 countries.
By members, you mean people, or do you mean congregations?
I mean people.
Okay.
People that are actually, pioneers.
Got you. Like you.
Employees. Yeah, like me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Essentially, pioneers employees, right?
Got
About
you.
half of them are American, and about half of them are from all over the world.
Got you.
So we have,
Started here.
Started in Orlando, Florida. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so which is where my office is.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we have sending bases, essentially outposts in Ghana and Cairo and Hong Kong and 17 different places around the world. And so the teams that people serve on, we want people to serve together in their efforts. Generally are this really kind of unique, kind of beautiful makeup of the global church, working together. And so we had people from Cote d'Ivoire and from Brazil and Nigeria, all kind of serving together to proclaim the gospel, across the Middle East.
Wow. Okay. And so now, then, obviously, as you came to the United States, your role changed. And so, can you tell us a little bit about that role now to kind of bring us up to where you are today since you came back to the U.S.?
Yeah. So we've been in San Antonio since summer of 2021, and after we moved back, we were asked to we considered serving on the executive team. And so, I got a role as a vice president, and I oversee, a couple of different major areas. So one is our pre-field ministries, which is basically all of our new missionaries that come in, from all their assessments, to their what training they're going to need, to their kind of general like onboarding. So we equip and send out about 100 new missionaries every year. And so that team, walks everybody through that process. There's usually, 2 years between their first set of application to actually get overseas, and so that team walks them through that process. I also oversee our church engagement team, which there's 3,400 churches in the U.S. that either send or support Pioneers U.S. missionaries. And so that team is 12 people that are in different regions across the country, and they look to strengthen local churches. Like how is it that local church can take their next step in fulfilling their role in the Great Commission. And so, that sometimes it's just meeting with their mission pastor or their director and praying with them, kind of hearing what the needs are. Sometimes it's resources. A lot of times it's they have a new missionary, and how's the church better support and prepare for the ministry that lies ahead for them.
Yeah.
So those are two kind of the primary teams that I'm deeply involved with. There's various others, and then a lot of it is just kind of big picture organization. Like, how do we best position ourselves to stay relevant in the future and to really keep creating avenues to be catalysts for people getting to the nations, both from the US and from other parts of the world. Like, I think one of the fun things was that Jordan and I were part of this meeting in 2019, and where one of our Egyptian brothers goes, I think there's this opportunity, we should open an office in Cairo. And we kind of walked through that process, what that would look like. And 2020, they launched a Cairo Pioneers Egypt office, and now there's, I think, 85 missionaries that are from Egypt or Sudan that are serving and planting churches, across really that corner of Africa, which is fun. So getting to be a part of that and figuring out how do we bring the right people together, bring the right funding together, and making sure they have the right staffing to make it happen. So that part's fun.
I want to go back just a little bit to something you mentioned a moment ago before, because I'm sure you got more to say about where you are right now. But you said the difference, or you distinguish two things: sending a missionary or supporting one. Can you talk about the sort of the nuances there?
Yeah. So we think it's really important that, first of all, that the local church sees itself as the sender.
Okay.
It's always kind of like the trick question of saying, how many people has Pioneers sent out as missionaries last year?
Yeah.
And the answer is always 0. We facilitate sending, but the local church is the sender.
Gotcha.
But for the sake of just clarity, like to say, hey, we want you to have a primary sending church that both has, deep connections and also spiritual authority, over here.
Gotcha.
And that church is going to be more involved in decisions on location, ministry, et cetera. But you might have 10 churches that you are connected with that support you.
Yeah.
And, bless that. We love that, and we think that's fantastic, and we're all supportive of it. But we differentiate because we think spiritual authority should go to one and not, to a basket of different churches.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How is the role that you're currently in evolved into what it is today, or has it mostly stayed the same as this vice presidential role?
Yeah, it's probably adapted a little bit every single year that I've been into this. Like, I started off just with the churches, and then kind of added in, some of the pre-field team, overseeing them, and then added in various other projects like some of our digital engagement resources and connecting with some of our media ministries and outreach, which has been really fun. But then, I think beyond that, as I think we become better known within the office and our kind of global body, like, we get a lot of our invitations these days to some of our international conferences. So like in March, Jordan and I went to a area conference for the Southern Balkans, and I was kind of their primary speaker for their conference, and then Jordan did free counseling for those that are there. And similar thing coming August, we'll go to the Middle East Regional Conference. So it'll be about 300 people that'll come together, and I'll help lead some sessions, and Jordan will do free counseling for people that are there. And so I think some of those situations continue to kind of bubble up, as we've
Yeah.
been in this role longer.
For sure. So I'll change gears a couple of times here coming up, but one, I just wanted to say or ask, can you share? I mean, there's so many things I'm sure over the breadth of your experience in this field, but what was maybe can you tell us of one anecdote that was, memorable either in a funny way or in just a life-changing way, or what's one story that might typify something that's not here in the U.S. and that's part of the missionary experience.
Yeah, I mean, obviously so many. I feel like a lifetime of stories crunched into a decade of life.
Yeah.
But I think one story that I always tell that kind of makes people laugh is that one of the days when we were this international church, had this buddy named Chibuka from Uganda who was a great guy. We still talk all the time. He's actually getting ready to plant a church in Uganda, which is fun. But he was just this young guy that showed up and was working at this dairy farm, and he said, "Pastor, we have the day off on Thursday because of the Muslim holiday. We're gonna have a soccer game out at the farm. Like, could you come and be our special guest?" So I was like, "Okay, sure." So I pick him up. We drive out there. We get met at the gate. Guy walks out with an AK-47, and he's looking at us like, "What are you doing here?" And Chibuka, who's about 4'9" and very African, says, "Oh, this is my brother." And the guy laughs. He goes, "Oh, okay." He lets me in, and so we get to the soccer field. He goes, "Yeah, for the holiday, we thought we'd have a special game of soccer, Christians against Muslims."
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I might have made a mistake coming here to the farm," And so they play a whole 90-minute game, right, on this patch, whole 90 minutes, and it's 115 degrees this day. And I'm just sitting in the shade, kind of like on a stool, kind of watching this. And the game's over, and everybody comes walking over, and Chibuka goes, "Pastor, the Christians won." And I was like, "All right." I wasn't really sure if I was supposed to celebrate or not. It wasn't how it was supposed to work. And so then he looks at me and goes, "For our trophy, we want you to share the gospel with everybody here." And I said, "Oh, okay." And so everybody kind of came up and sat under the trees, and I pulled my phone out of my pocket, and I picked up Romans, and I said, "All right," and share the gospel with everybody.
Wow.
And it led to a Bible study, and then ended up about 3 months later, we ended up baptizing about 10 people that played in that game.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And it was like not in any way what I thought Thursday was going to look like.
I guess not.
Yeah.
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 That is wild. That is wild. So I want to talk a little bit just for the church to know, and this is a more bean counting thing, but obviously Pioneer is not a for-profit organization. They get their funds through donations and through search. I know that's has been a big part of your life. I mean, of every missionary's life.
Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about, how much money does it take to make this thing happen so that you can do God's work and not worry about how you're going to live? You know
Sure.
what I'm saying?
Yeah. Really. I mean, it comes through donations from churches, from individuals. All the things that I'm blessed that in my role, Pioneers, has some investments, some kind of things, so they cover my family's health insurance, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And about 10%, of our overall costs, which is not a lot, but the alternative is that we essentially tax the missionaries to fund the home staff, and that doesn't feel great, and so our president raises support, and so it's like, I think it's a way we kind of show solidarity with our people that are on the far corners of the earth serving the Lord. And so for us, where we're at is that kind of the expectation is that we try to raise about $7,500 a month,
Gotcha.
to cover our costs and salary and those kinds of things.
Does that include like travel expenses and all that stuff?
No, travel expenses are that's part of the separate budget that comes out of our general fund. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, great. So, and I guess the next, well, and so I guess the question is that being met right now overall? Are you all fully funded and
Yeah, no, we're about 6,000 a month is kind of
Okay.
where it seems like where we've been for about 3 years.
Okay.
It's kind of we've been holding steady, and so we are, yeah, really about 1,500 short of where we should be.
okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been asking all the missionaries that, and just to sort of see that it's kind of a thing. It's kind of there's especially in the economy, just as it is in the United States
Yeah.
right now. That's a thing, and we need to hear that and be like, oh, so invitation to step up into that. So I just a couple more things, and then we'll kind of wrap up. I guess. What are some non-monetary ways too that Christchurch specifically could interact, engage with, support you all?
Yeah, yeah, obviously, we have a deep love for Christchurch and the people there. Obviously, Jordan's parents are members, Jordan's sister's family are members. And so, we love opportunities to share God's heart for the world. And so, I think certain things like when there's, we have Missions Month, those kinds of things. I love the opportunity to share, just to encourage and to challenge and to God's people with how they can be involved in things that we do. I think there's various opportunities that come around, like if there's when there's even new missionaries, there's a family that was in San Antonio a few months ago. They were heading to Thailand. And so obviously being able to connect, with those kinds of things is great and helpful. And then I'm always curious. I'm trying to kind of work through some of these that some things that I'm kind of developing are exposure trips, for people to see kind of what it looks like interacting with the unreached around the world. And so if as those things come together, like I think it'd be great for Christchurch to consider, like, hey, is this something we want 2 or 3 of our people to go on to see and experience and figure out, like, hey, would this be a good long-term thing for us to be involved in or not? Like we had talked about before, there was some people I met in Cairo. There was a Presbyterian church in the Nile Delta that has a real vision for planting more churches across the Nile Delta. Like, would it be possible to partner with them at some point in the future? And so I think these opportunities come up, and so I love when the right connection is made, for them.
For sure. Excellent. Well, I guess the last thing I'll say is, do you have any word of encouragement for Christchurch, or, so what message would you have to say, if you could say just directly to everybody, say, hey, this is from the Remke family to you all?
Yeah, I think from us, we would just say thank you guys. I think thank you guys for the love and support you show to our family. I think thank you guys for your faithfulness and just wanting to stay, connected to the Lord and to His Word and those kinds of things in these seasons of transition. And so we're encouraged by you guys, and we appreciate you guys.
Thank you so much, man. That was awesome.